Okay, we are live. Welcome everyone to the Perspective series on the Navigating Out platform. I am Jonathan Perez, Senior Consultant at Thoughtium. This is part 2 of a 3-part series on the secrets of high-performing teams. This is a Perspective series I had the opportunity to create. And if you haven't had a chance to check out the article, you can find it in the description below. I summarize there some of the key behaviors that we believe leads to high-performing team. And one of the key things that we highlight there is building a culture of trust. And on the topic of building a culture of trust, we have the opportunity today to go deeper on this discussion and hopefully give you a lot of value through a conversation with a dear friend of ours, Matt Prostko. He is the author of the book called Momentum Culture, and he's going to go deeper with us in explaining the process of what culture is, how to build it, and then the connection that has to generating team performance. And there's a couple other cool things that we'll expand on here to hopefully give you a lot of value and key takeaways for you to build high-performing teams wherever you are in whatever organization you're a part of. So let's go ahead and bring Matt on.
All right. Jonathan, how are you?
Hey, doing great. Cool. Well, Matt, I know that we've had some cool connection conversations to begin to prep for this discussion and the value we wanted to bring to our viewers. So the Momentum Culture book, give us a quick download on the book, and then I'll go into some of the questions we wanted to start off on. But what is the book? What's the title? What's the purpose of the book?
Sure. So the title of the book is Momentum Culture, How High-Performing Companies Leverage Culture for Competitive Advantage.
Love it.
And, I spent about 15 years or so doing consulting for large enterprises. And in the end, all of that consulting was related to culture, how they operated, how they made decisions, how they turned ideas between people into business results. Mm-hmm. And so sooner or later, everybody came back to me and said, okay, Matt, we want to build a high performing culture. And I said, that sounds great. What do you mean by that? And they said, I don't know. We don't know what it is, but we know we want one.
Yeah.
And so that really led to doing some research. And I did a research project that, covered the S&P 500 and dividing companies into leaders and laggards and starting with an assessment to try to uncover the factors that mattered. And after that research was complete, I had ended up with 6 key factors that turned into the Momentum Culture framework, and that's what the book's about.
Yes, awesome. Yeah, and I got a chance to get a high-level look into it, and it looks amazing. And yeah, that was one of the main reasons I was really excited to have you on here. And again, really build the bridge between the idea of high performance, because it's a hot topic, and what does it mean to build that into a culture over time. So as we engage in the conversation and we unpack this a little bit, Matt, would love to hear your own philosophy, your own perspective, your own definition of culture. Let's begin there.
Yeah, that's a $64,000 question, isn't it?
Yes.
If everybody had a clean definition of that, it wouldn't be such a fascinating topic, and I wouldn't sell any books. But for sure, that is an issue. And as I mentioned, the fact that large enterprise didn't know the answer to that question is why the book exists in the first place. And so when you really back up from it, you read most of the articles that are out there, they tend to stick around this idea of shared values or aligned behaviors or whatever. But those definitions always felt very incomplete and that there was something missing. Yeah. And as I mentioned, I went through and did the research that I did. And 3 of the elements that came out of that research were really traditional type of things that you would think about with culture, with how employees relate to one another, how they relate to the company, so on and so forth. But actually, the 3 that rose to the top, the ones that were most correlated with positive cultures and high performance in business results, were actually organizational capabilities, or things that feel much closer to that. Things around making decisions, about being able to align to a vision and a strategy, about how people come together, learn, and solve problems. And that was the part that I think is novel and that's unique about the Momentum framework, that 3 capabilities and 3 connections came out of that research that ended up making the framework. And so in short, my definition for culture, as it comes out of this book, is connection times capability is what equals culture.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know that we had some really cool discussions unpacking each of those. And one of the dialogues that came out of that, Matt, that I really resonated was even on a team, for example, or within an organization where there might be a lot of trust per se, that if they don't have the capabilities to succeed in the direction where they want to take the business, it might not be enough. Or if the capability side is really developed, but there's no trust, right, then it's also not, right? There's part of the formula that's missing based on your framework. So can you do a little bit of a definition for each of those? How do you define capabilities and how do you define connection? And then we can go a little bit deeper on those.
Sure. So when you think of a capability, it tends to be a set of behaviors that are enabled by a set of sort of structures or processes. So it's generally something that I view, in my definition anyway, that's more owned by the organization itself. Does it have the enablement? Does it have the foundation? And is it fostering a set of behaviors that put together can actually do something, right? That can perform an activity and perform value and create value in doing that activity. And then a connection is simply an employee's connection to a stakeholder of some sort. So in the momentum framework, certainly the idea of how they're connected to other employees, very important. How they are connected to their manager and management, also very important. One that is not quite so common is that has turned out to be very important was their connection to the customer or to the external market that they serve. And without that sort of grounding in who we're all doing it for, tended to have a big leverage to culture.
Gotcha. And so the connection piece, and I'm curious to back up in the sense that when you run into organizations, have you seen either the capability side lacking more or the connection side lacking more?
Yeah, for sure. So the research says that the capability section is actually lagging. That there is a certain amount of connection where people feel some bond to each other, to the company's purpose and values, and to customers. But the issues around some of the capabilities are actually more glaring, and they actually have a higher statistical correlation to culture measurement and firm performance.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's really interesting. And with the connection side, one of the things I want to dive into then is when it comes to trust, right? And we talked about this a little bit in terms of building high performance. Tell us a little bit more about your philosophy on the connection side and how it relates to trust or lack thereof on a team.
Absolutely. So within the momentum framework, you nailed it very early on. The concept of capability without connection or vice versa is the definition of failure. So each in the framework, each one of those is a match set. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about how the employees relate to one another, that connection is foundationally based on trust. Do I trust the other person that I'm working with? And that enables them to collaborate. That would be the connection piece that matters for how coworkers work together. When that trust is present, they have the ability then to have a capability to come together and learn and solve problems. And so that's the match set that I call fusion, bringing ideas and people together to create energy.
Got it. Yeah. And it makes sense. I mean, even logically, where if I don't have trust for a team, or I don't feel connected to a team, I'm actually not going to have the motivation to go and collaborate anyway.
and the energy isn't present to create anything new. Right.
Yeah. So it does generate energy. Absolutely. That makes sense. Yeah. From your perspective, and when you work with clients, when it comes to building connection and organizing the culture in a way or building the culture in a way that does foster trust, what are some of the key things that maybe in your book or with your work with clients you suggest, especially maybe you get a team leader who says, hey, my team, I want to build this culture of high performance, and you can tell that maybe they have the skills, maybe they come in with a strong skill set around strategy, et cetera, but it's the trust that's lacking. Where do you start with those teams, Matt, and how do you suggest they move forward to build or deepen that trust and connection?
Yeah. There's certainly no easy answer for that. One of the things that I did alongside the quantitative research was a lot of interviews. And so I did about 40 CEO, CHRO interviews. And what was really interesting about it was that when I asked people the question, what was the best culture you were ever a part of and why? The answers were startlingly similar. And they never resonated with, oh, we had these great perks and we had this really cushy offsites and all that stuff. It never was like that. What it was is that was common was I was doing the hardest work I ever did in my life. I grinded in that job, but I was grinding shoulder to shoulder, side by side with really cool people that were in it with me. And so there was a little bit of a band of brothers sort of nature to the story, right? This doing something difficult together. And so what I really talk to clients about is not everybody can just say, hey, we're going to be back in the office again. I get that.
Yeah.
But the idea of not ever co-locating people together to work, I think it's a loser. I know that's probably not a popular thing to say, but I just don't think there's any replacement for bringing human beings back together to work together. And so my recommendation is when it's time for people to learn, have them learn together. When you've got a big problem, bring people together and have them solve it. Yeah. When you really are trying to win a new customer, bring that team together and have them win it together. And that's how you'll build trust and connection.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, one of the things we really focus on, well, both internally at ThoughtTeam, is bringing the team together in person. And I love, at minimum, once a quarter, we'll get together and connect and go deep on where the business is going, what are we working towards, and staying aligned to that North Star. But even as we work with clients externally, that's one of the things that, one, we're also not only proposing, right, but we're also seeing there's a lot more interest in bringing people back. At least those folks and those clients who really want to build that high performing culture, they start to recognize that it's necessary. And so you're suggesting also that based on the research, the folks, did you hear folks mention explicitly that they also really appreciated being together in person? Was that part of your research at all?
100%. That was definitely all resident in the anecdotal research. And now let's to be fair, I was talking to CEOs and CHROs that tend to be Generation X at least. So they were operating from a different paradigm. But recently, Gartner just finished some research talking about the nature of connection, in the enterprise, and it's at an all-time low, and it's moving linear down. And I don't think there's you don't have to be a super sleuth to figure out that when you're talking to somebody only over Zoom and that's the only relationship you have with them, your relationship is going to be transactional in nature. And then there's an opportunity for misunderstanding. There's an opportunity for a lack of empathy. There's an opportunity for a lack of real investment and accountability to your partner. From my experience, this idea of shared values and purpose, it's a very popular sort of notion today that, you have to give your employees purpose. And I don't disagree, but I do believe that is far more important on hire date than it is later. People hire on to that, but when it comes down to doing their very best work, to going above and beyond, to do something great, they don't do it for a flag. They don't do it for a value. They do it because they're doing it with somebody and they owe somebody else their best work because that other person's counting on them. Yeah. And without that, I don't believe you'll ever get to that level of great performance. You'll never be somebody who has a competitive advantage in the marketplace without that. I believe that's going to be the story for the next 10 years at least, that people are going to talk about the chemistry of bringing people together. And how that is going to be their unique sauce, their unique mix in the industry, in the market.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, tell us what's the name of that report you mentioned on Gartner?
I'll be honest with you, I don't remember the name of it.
But
I listened to their podcast recently, so pick it up on their podcast. And, it's absolutely something that's popping up in more than one place now. I believe McKinsey did one as well recently. So take a look around.
Yeah. And essentially you're saying that it was like a 30 to 40% people ranking that they feel connected to the
Yeah,
organization they work with and the people
that's
they
right.
work with. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. That's a pretty low number if you
That's a
ask.
very low number. And
Yeah.
when you think about the way companies are designed, and you think about the title of my book, this concept of momentum, Newton's first law says that things that are in motion tend to stay in motion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that's what we're experiencing right now. The very biggest brands in the world are going to roll on for some time because there's a lot of momentum behind those brands, a lot of momentum behind that technology. But without real connection, you're going to lose that momentum. And sadly enough, it's one of those things that is insidious. You don't see it slowing down to the point until it stops.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it does, the same thing. Things at rest tend to stay at rest. So getting it moving again is going to be very, very difficult. I worked at a company called Motorola for about 10 years, and it was in slow decline while I was there. As a matter of fact, if anybody wants to blame me, you should. I think I might have killed the company. But it was losing momentum over time until the point where in a shorter time than you would think for a 100-year-old company that invented the TV, the radio, the cell phone, everything you can possibly imagine, but they lost their mojo and it was gone and there was no getting it back. And so I think large enterprises would do well to be paranoid about their culture and to stay ahead of it, because objects at rest tend to stay at rest.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I love about how you frame it in the book is it's just the laws of physics, right? And you mention how if your culture, if you notice, and this is where I love the personal responsibility aspect. I was on a call with a group that I'm working with, and we started to talk about this, because if you see the culture is going in a certain direction and you don't say anything about it or you don't act on it, that the momentum is going in a certain direction. And if it's going in the direction you don't want it to go, momentum is momentum. That's nonetheless, right? And so
if you think about the concepts of the continuums of culture, you probably can think of it in 3 layers, and one being a compliance culture. In other words, you're going to behave a certain way or I'll fire you, right? Once it gets a little bit better, it's a leader-led culture where the leader is telling everybody what to do and holding the line. But the very best culture is when you get to the top and the employees are running it themselves, right? They're holding everybody accountable. And one of the most dramatic sort of examples of it is, in my experience working with construction and oil and gas, is the concept of safety culture. And at the very best safety cultures, if you're even in the building, not on a work site or any place that's truly dangerous, you're walking down the stairs and you don't have your hand on the handrail. One of the other people walking up the stairs will say, please hold the handrail when you're going down. Right. And that's not because they're being complied to do so. It's because it is second nature. It is part of just their reflex on how we do things and how we operate. And I think a great momentum culture, a great high performing company has their own sort of notion of that as well.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, and I would say I'm just imagining if I was the person walking along that person, right? There's 2 things that can happen. One, I take it personal and I say, don't tell me what to do, Matt. I do what I want to do. Or, oh, thanks for the reminder. I'm remembering the type of culture we're looking to build here. I appreciate you calling me out on that.
That's exactly right. And it comes from a place of caring, right? In a high safety issue, you're saying, no, I just want you to make it home tonight safe, right?
Yeah.
And when you think about what it means in a standard enterprise that's not a dangerous place, it's, hey, no, I want us to win together.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. I love that. So in your experience, Matt, with teams that you've worked with or cultures that you've worked with, if you were to paint a picture of, because I'm wondering, anybody listening, maybe they have a team, then they might be building momentum in a certain direction. Maybe they feel like they're doing okay, but they could be doing better. Where would you say a leader begin on their journey, right? So on a personal level, but also on a team level, if they're sitting here listening and they're wondering what are some key things they can begin to do and take action on, what are some of the things you would highlight?
Yeah, two elements I'll take on that. One is, I call it the culture of you. We make a culture around ourselves in the 3 feet all around us. And how you show up, how you interact, it creates like a mini culture around you. And so if you don't think that, you're really missing the point. Every time you show up for work, you show up for a meeting, you show up for a customer, you are bringing a culture to that environment right there for a moment, right? It's not just a vibe, it's a competency, it is a confidence, it is a way of communicating, it's a set of behaviors that define the interaction that you're going to have in there. So I would encourage everybody to ask yourself, like, what's the culture I'm bringing to the table, right? When you think of like one person on your team, are they a culture of seriousness or jokester? Are they a culture of quality, or are they a culture of growth, or whatever? You can think of somebody right now and you can say, I can tell you what they're about, So then you got to turn it around and ask yourself, what am I about? Right? When people see me come into the room, when they see me sit down at the table, what's the culture of me? So that's one to sit there and noodle on for a little while, and maybe with a glass of wine in your hand or something before you take it too seriously. But by all means, think about that. But you mentioned more about team leaders, right? And how do you run a high performance team? And so I would begin with the capabilities. Mm-hmm. And if you think about at any team, a team's got a playbook. They've got the things that they do, the things that they get together to do. And people are discussing those capabilities all the time, whether you're present for it as the team leader or not. And if you've got a very well orchestrated set of capabilities, you've got a bread and butter play that you guys can run, and you're very good at it and you're effective at it, and people can just naturally do their jobs without having it be kind of a mess or a circus or something like that, then when they get together, they don't talk about that. They talk about the positive things about what we're going to get out of it. If your fundamentals of how your team runs is kind of a mess, then they're connecting, but they're connecting over what a mess you are.
Right.
So, stay home. Fix, tend to your own knitting, get your basics down, right? Get your fundamentals down as a team. And then once you have those things square, then start building on top of it, greater and greater connection. How do we get even better? How do you guys start owning this away from me? All of that, right? It's the stages of teaming, right? So start with the fundamentals is my answer.
Yeah. This is awesome. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, I really resonate with that. And I love the culture of you portion that you're alluding to, because I like that's a lot of where I love to start also. And even my own philosophy is taking personal responsibility for if I'm seeing that we have a culture of XYZ and I'm not happy with it, or I know it can be better, what is my own contribution to that? And how am I contributing to that? And then to your point, what I hear you saying is also if you are in a team, looking at how you're operating, how are you organizing yourself? How are you actually doing the work, and is it working? And if not, it sounds like capabilities is. Would you say, the way I'm thinking about it in my mind, and let me know if it doesn't resonate, is it also aligned to like ways of working? Are we aligned on our ways of working and how we're doing it, and is it working for us?
I'm certain that's true. There's a lot of things that are in the mix there. Mm-hmm. But I have found over the years that this idea that everybody has to be involved in how defining everything on how it gets done, or people don't feel, enfranchised. I'm not so sure that's true. Most of the time people can't come onto a job, they come onto a team. And if they're actually not a prima donna that is just looking to cause rancor, most of them are saying, put me in, coach, what do you need me to do? Yeah. Right. Yeah. And all they're trying to do is, hey, make it clear for me, help me be set up to win, and show me the playbook. And they don't necessarily have to be the author of everything. There's a place for a leader, to say this is where we're going and this is how we're going to go up the hill. Yeah. But ideally, you're somehow doing it and it's fun. In none of the interviews when I talk to somebody about their best culture, it never wasn't present. Fun was always part of the discussion. And it's one of the things I recall back on one of my roles as a leader in the company I was working in. They decided they wanted to have a fun committee because people weren't having fun. And I'm going to tell you what, if you've got a fun committee, I promise you nobody's having any fun. And if you have to have a culture committee, you probably don't have a very good culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
So figure out how to, do the work, bring the team together. And if you can't have fun and the team can't have fun at their work, then, go back to the drawing board, because you're never going to hit the levels of performance that you're looking for if that isn't present. I don't have any research to tell me that, other than absolute years of experience.
Yeah. I deeply resonate with that. Yeah. And that's the type of team I'm attracted to as well, in terms of where I choose to work. And yeah, it's interesting because what I'm hearing you say also with the high performing teams is yes to structuring ways of working and ways of organizing ourselves. But in the end, if we're all aligned, and this goes back to what I hear you calling the connection piece, if we're all feeling super connected, it seems to me like the capability aspect organizes itself in a way, like we're going to figure it out. We're going to find a way because we're in it, and we're in it. We're having fun. We're enjoying the process. It's freaking hard. Yes. But we're in it together. And that in and of itself drives that culture, that of performance. That's what we're calling.
You've got it. And when somebody starts analyzing that the problem is because somebody doesn't feel like they had a chance to share their feelings or their ideas or something else, it's not because of the process. There's something missing, right? When you start having somebody or some people saying that there's things that are wrong, and when you listen to it, you're like, that doesn't sound all that major. And it's because something else is missing, right? There's something fundamental that is out of there. Either the people have no connection to one another, or the team is just not able to execute, capably. And so instead of just saying, hey, it's kind of a mess and I don't like these people I'm working with, they say something else.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think the flip side I've seen is, and different types of teams I've worked with, is the people that I've seen want to lean towards high performance. They actually want to become the solution rather than complain, right?
That's exactly right.
They have the energy behind wanting to essentially become that which they see as missing on the team, rather than sitting there and complain about it.
For a while. And then they just went off that team.
There it is. And that can be the deeper thing, right? Is it actually even in alignment for them anymore? Like, do they want to be on the team first and foremost? Or is the mission in alignment with their career aspirations, et cetera? There's deeper layers for sure.
Yeah. What's scary about a lack of trust, on the team, is that, it does lead to cynicism. If you have a lack of trust in each other, or a lack of trust in the basic fundamentals of the company, it does lead to cynicism. And, I was dealing with a few companies that, had some of those elements, in the group that they were working with. And one of the things that we came away with was that we really felt we had found the answer to worldwide energy sustainability, because cynicism never wears out. It can go forever. I don't know how there's so much energy in cynicism, but it's like cracking the atom. It's really something else. So if it's there, you either have to fix it or root it out. And because it never takes a day off.
Yeah. I hear you on that. It is an interesting thing, and it becomes a lot of why for some people, like the adrenaline of constantly doing can become addicting. I mean, it's like, it is literally the adrenaline drive that people can get. That's my own philosophy on it, as people get addicted to the very own adrenaline it's producing, and it affects everything.
You're 100% right. One of the properties of physics is entropy. In other words, things go to a higher state of disorder and a lower state of energy naturally. So you have to actually apply energy if you want to maintain alignment and maintain connection, maintain bonds. That's just the nature of physics.
Yep. Love it, Matt. Well, I'm looking at time, and the last question I have is there anything that maybe you thought we'd cover, that you thought we'd go into based on any of your research or experience that you want to share about?
That's a good question. There's obviously a ton. I guess I would say one of the questions I usually get asked is, hey, so how does this change from this industry to that industry? You did a lot of research over, across all different kinds of companies, different size companies, different industries, different, different functional roles. What did you learn there? And interestingly enough, the data was shockingly similar across all these things. These are human issues. They are not, unique to personalities or individuals or industries or whatever. So the momentum score, which was like, my sort of distillation one number score, really modulated somewhere between like 40 and 46 or something like that. So, I mean, it was not a lot of variability. There was no real variability across company size. The only thing that showed variability, and this is a good one to leave on, is I did 3 layers within the organization: individual contributors, management, middle management, and senior executives. Mm-hmm. And there's essentially a stair step down in the perception of culture. Senior executives perceive it to be the highest. And then there's about a 10% drop in each one of those layers. So when it drops one layer of leadership down, drops 10%, drops another 10%. And, one of the things that is a great, sort of diagnostic within the assessment is to watch those breaks, right? Mm-hmm. If that break between middle management or individual contributor and senior executive is wider than 10%, that is indicative of a culture that's about to break, right? Because that just means that the gap between how executives think of themselves and how the rest of the company thinks of them is wider than it ought to be. And then, just the idea of having that watching those fluctuations, because there's then, sort of perceptions of power differences, which obviously is a precursor to cultural problems.
Wow. Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah, and I hear you on the human piece, right? Because again, sometimes there's this idea, and I've had to understand that over years as well, where humans are just humans, and we want to understand, at least I believe as leaders, we want to understand how we function and how we operate and what drives us and what motivates us. And that in and of itself is a huge component. So yeah, it's very interesting to hear through all your research that I think people would have that question of like, well, I work in this industry. How is that different from this industry? Well, if you got humans, you're probably going to have similar issues.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And, finishing, right where we began, what is the nature of culture? I would say I'll leave you with one other kind of provocative thing.
Please. Yeah.
People think of culture that it is in and of its, in an end to its, unto itself.
Yeah.
And I don't really believe that. I've spent enough time with large corporations as a consultant and to realize, always through the talent function, but to realize that those companies were put together for a reason. And they were put together to create returns for shareholders. Mm-hmm. Now, along the way, we hope we do great things for people and the planet and all of this sort of thing. But at the end, if you are not making returns for shareholders, they're going to have somebody else in that chair making those decisions going forward. So when you think about that, if that's what the organization in itself is there to do, you have a strategy to help you do it, right? I'm here to give returns to shareholders. That's more than just the return I would get on a CD that I could put in a bank. They want more than that. So I need a strategy to get it there. A culture is simply there then to make the strategy go. So if the culture could be a great culture, but if it's not a culture that helps this strategy deliver that outcome, then it's not a high performing culture. So sometimes people want to take culture out of its context and just say, let's just talk about it in and of itself. And that is not relevant. Yeah. It is a means to an end. If companies could make all the returns they need without a strategy, they wouldn't have one. If they could do it without benefits for employees, they would do that. Trust me. A culture is here to create a sustainable model that regenerates itself, that when you invest in it, it gives you more back than you gave to it. And great cultures all do that. They create a momentum for companies that is something that everybody can feel and experience. And when they do, it is like a tailwind at your back. And it's that feeling of that tailwind that, wait a minute, we've got something here. Mm-hmm. And that is the energy that fuels great performance, great outcomes. And what was interesting about all of those interviews and those anecdotal stories is that in those stories of this was my best culture, they always finished with two types of statements at the end. The first one was, I learned everything I ever knew about leadership right there. I learned everything about how to be a great team member or to create a great team right then. And the second thing they left me with was the getting the band back together statement. Weird, not unless they were still in the culture that was their best culture. Some were, many were not. They always ended up saying almost the same thing. Oh, and by the way, if any of those people ever got back together again at a new company, I would drop this one like a bad habit and I would be there in a minute.
Wow.
And so when you think about that, some of those stories were 30 some odd years old, Jonathan. But you could see them recalling it like it was yesterday. And so for anybody who's listening to this, if you are successful at creating one of these really powerful cultures where people get to do the best work they've ever done in their life, it's hard, and they do it with people that they love being around, and that somehow doing hard things with these people is somehow fun. And that nobody talks about having to go back to the office. They talk about getting to go to the office. If you can create that, you will give people the best time of their lives. Think about that. That for 30 years from now, they're going to be talking about you and this culture and this company and this time of their life that was formative and special and one of the best memories that they have. That's what's out there for you. That's what's possible. And so I encourage everybody, go do it. Give somebody the time of their lives, because if you do, you're going to have a lot of fun and you're going to make a ton of money. So go out there, have fun, build great people that remember the time they were with you as the best time they ever had.
Yeah, love it. Very, very much resonate with that, Matt. Yeah, really, really. I'm feeling jacked up. I'm like, yes, let's go. Let's go do the thing. Yes. Right? So yeah, thank you for sharing your wisdom. The research that you've done and your experience is really, really valuable. And yeah, I think anybody that listens to this in the replay going to get a lot of great nuggets here. So thank you, Matt. Where can people find you, your work, and if they're interested to go deeper with you?
Awesome. Well, first and foremost, it's on Amazon, Momentum Culture. And secondly, if you want to go to the website, momentumculture.com.
Okay. Awesome, Matt. Well, thank you so much again for your time. Really appreciate you. And yeah, we'll stay in touch, brother. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Okay. All right, team. Well, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Perspective series, part 2 of 3. That was awesome. That was a really, really great conversation. I trust that you got a lot of value from that. And we look forward to seeing you on the next one next week for the third part of this Perspective series. Thank you again for tuning in.